This video is made for ARC 252 at Cal Poly. The purpose is to introduce a digital workflow to go from 3D to 2D, and specifically to go from a Rhino 3D model to plan, section, or axon, which is processed through CAD and printed. So this is the first part of a series of quick videos, a series of 8 quick videos. This is the first one where we're going to talk about view selection. So there are 3 general view types that we might look to transition from your 3D model into a 2D drawing. The first is an orthographic drawing, like a plan, a section, or an elevation. The second is a paraline drawing. In this case, we'll look at isometric. Both of these could be considered sort of measurable or informational, in that in both cases, both with orthographic and with paraline drawings, no matter where you put a ruler on the drawing, you can get an accurate measurement. Those are different than a perspective view, which has foreshortening. Things in the distance are smaller than things in the foreground, and so measurements are less accurate, but alternatively you get a more experiential view. So this set of videos is really talking about the first two, the kind of informational measurable drawings, the orthographic and the paraline. So we're not really going to look at perspective drawings here, although some of the methods talked about can be used. So I'm just going to go into a Rhino model here. I have a sort of useless building that I've made for this purpose. I'm just going to kind of pan around so that we can get a look at it. Essentially, it's a structure sitting on a landscape, has some elevation change to it, some openings, and some transitions like stairs. So the first thing I'm going to try to do is to create a plan view out of this 3-dimensional drawing, a 2-dimensional plan view. And I'm going to do that using a clipping plane. So if I go into the top view here, and I type in the command clipping plane, most important, you want to kind of follow on tools you haven't used before. You want to make sure that you're always reading Rhino's prompt to you. So Rhino's telling me to identify the first corner of a rectangle. So I'm just going to pick just outside of my model. It's then asking me to pick a third corner. And so you can't see it, unfortunately, because it's white. But let me move this over. I'm going to move this to a clipping planes layer that I've already made. There we go. So let me go into perspective so you can see what it's doing here. The clipping planes tool is made a clipping plane, which is not showing anything behind the clipping plane. It's just showing what's being cut by the clipping plane and anything beyond the clipping plane. So essentially a plan view in this case, because I drew the clipping plane in the XY plane of this drawing. So if I were to select this clipping plane and type in move, and in this case I'm going to click vertical yes, so I can move it up and down. I can move the clipping plane up so that it's not passing through my structure, or again I can move it down, clicking vertical so that I can move it up and down. Move it down, and as it goes down it passes through my structure, and you can see in red what's being cut by the structure. What's being cut by the clipping plane. So mine is showing up in red simply because I have the clipping plane on a layer which I've called clipping planes, and I've colored it red. So you can go ahead and change this if you want, so that you can on the fly take a look at what a plan might look like in your 3D model. So you can set, based on the scale of your model, you can set this clipping plane to an appropriate height so that it gives you the floor plan that you want. Typically floor plans are cut at 4 feet above finished floor elevation, and that's typically so that you can get above most of the furniture or the windowsills. Likely in your studio project, those types of rules may not apply, and so in my case I'm just going to kind of pick the best floor plan cutting location. So I'm just going to try to get up above all of the landscape and try to show all of the entries. When you get the view that you want, if it's distracting, you can turn off the clipping plane, and then you have a pretty good view of the plan. So these same techniques can be used to produce a section. If I were to sort of get rid of this clipping plane, and instead of looking in the top view when drawing the clipping plane, if I were to look in one of my other orthographic views like the right, I could enter the clipping plane command again. Rhino's finishing my thought here, and I could draw the clipping plane, and then I like to go into the perspective view in order to manipulate it. So I'm going to select the clipping plane and move it through the structure until I get the section that I want. This one, for instance, and now I'm looking at a section of the structure. So this is a pretty effective way to start to get a two-dimensional drawing out of your three-dimensional model. It works well because as you're modeling and on the fly, you can always take a look at how your section is looking, and you can adjust the model based on that section if necessary. And it also is going to set you up in later steps to project this view into a two-dimensional view so that you can get it into AutoCAD. Really quickly before we finish this video up, I want to take a look at making a paraline drawing or an isometric drawing. So I'm just going to delete that clipping plane, and we'll do that. Rhino, a relatively new feature to Rhino is that it will allow you to make an isometric view. If you simply right-click up in your perspective, up in the name of the view window, go to Set View, and then down towards the bottom you'll see an option to make isometrics, and it gives you a preset series of isometrics in these four directions. For instance, you can look from the northeast, and you can see now that the structure looks a bit different. It's an abstracted view where there is no foreshortening. Everything is drawn parallel, and so I can just kind of select any of these isometric views and pick the one that does the best to talk about my ideas. Okay, that's the end of this first video where we're talking about view selection. The second video looks at how to project these views into two-dimensional representations that we can export into AutoCAD.